Today, we're diving into a story that honestly feels like it's been ripped straight from a cyber thriller. We've got a young hacker, a string of pretty high-profile digital attacks, and a government response that has a lot of people asking a simple question. What actually happened? And who gets to decide what justice looks like here? So, let's start with a number. 180. That's how many days of preventive detention an 18-year-old hacker, known as Vlady, is currently facing in Uruguay. That's 6 months in jail before even getting to trial.
But here's the twist, and it is a big one. The entire case file, all the evidence they used to lock him up for half a year, is confidential. It's a state secret. So let's try to piece together what we actually know.
And that brings us to part 1, an 18-year-old in jail. This is all about the fight over that secret case file, what's known as the expediente.
This question, from a media personality named Alberto Hill, who's been following this whole thing super closely, really just cuts right to the heart of the problem. I mean, think about it. How do you defend yourself against evidence you're not even allowed to see?
So with the official case totally sealed off, the only public story we have comes from Vlady's alleged accomplice, a hacker who goes by the name Gob.
Okay, so what do they admit to doing? Well, Gob says their main action was something called a defacement. The best way to think about it is like digital graffiti. You're not stealing data, you're just changing how a website looks to post a message. And how they got access is a really crucial point. Gob claims they didn't actually breach any systems. What he says is they used a public tool, it's called Intelligence X, to find login info that was already leaked from other totally unrelated data breaches. Now you have to look at this timeline because it is just wild. On March 19th, this tourism website, Bukabus, gets defaced. Just 8 days later, on March 27th, Vlady is arrested. That kind of speed is pretty staggering, and it definitely raises some questions about the investigation. And this right here is Gob's whole argument. He insists that what they did was a prank, maybe a form of protest, but it's not a crime, and certainly not one that should land an 18-year-old in prison for 6 months while he waits for a trial. So with this secret case file and all these serious charges flying around in the press, Vlady's allies decided they had to take their fight to the public. And this is where the two stories just completely break apart. According to media reports, Vlady is being accused of hacking multiple government ministries, a shopping center, a whole laundry list of serious stuff. But Gob's admission? He says, nope, we did the Bukabus defacement and we made a Telegram bot using data that was already out there. He claims all those other charges are pure fiction. In his public statements, Gob tries to paint a totally different picture. He's not talking about malicious criminals, he's talking about curious kids on a computer who are being made an example of. He's literally pleading for his friend's freedom. And this is where that media personality, Alberto Hill, becomes such a central figure. He basically gave Godob the only platform to tell his side of the story. But as he points out, he published Godob's audio and then just crickets. A total silence, he called it. The mainstream press just wasn't touching it, which basically erased one side of the story from public view.
So to try and get a wider view on all this, Hill actually brought in an expert from Mexico to help explain the bigger picture.
And this expert, Hector, his analysis really adds another layer here. He argues that, look, governments would often rather find a scapegoat to look tough on crime than admit that their own security wasn't up to snuff. He also questions the forensics, suggesting that sometimes authorities just find a known online personality and pin the crime on them instead of doing a really thorough investigation. And well, all of that brings us back to today and to the silence. The situation has taken a really dramatic turn. Gob says that Vlady is now being held incommunicado, so he can't speak with anyone. And then, in a pretty stunning development, his family has asked Gob and all his other supporters to stop their public campaign. Just go silent. So the one source of information from their side has now gone dark. And so this is where we're left. We have an 18-year-old in jail, a family calling for silence, and an official story that is completely sealed from public view. It forces you to ask a really fundamental question. When the whole process is hidden and the evidence is a secret, what does justice even look like?